If I were to start my photography business today, I'm sure it would be a lot different than when I first started it. But I really want to talk to you about starting a business as a wedding photographer. So if you're really clear on becoming a photographer and weddings is really what you want to be shooting, I'm going to walk you through what I would do differently now that I've been shooting weddings for 9 years. And I hope that you get some insight into what I wish I had done back then, because obviously looking back, it's always easy to see what we could have done better. But the idea is that hopefully you'll get some insight on what I would do now, or if you're thinking about niching into wedding photography, these would be definitely some tips that you should walk away with feeling like, okay, yeah, I can definitely implement those. And those are some things that I can work on to sort of really push that love that I have for weddings through my portfolio and through my work and just through all of the conversations that you're having with people.
Yeah, this relates to a lot of people that are either first year trying to get into weddings and they have a bit of photo experience, or you have a few weddings booked this year and you're trying to get to that next level. So we're going to go all the way back to like your brand new to kind of photography and wedding photography specifically. We're not going to talk about like learning camera settings, but we're going to talk about strategies you can do in the wedding industry so that you can propel your business farther and focus on the right things. Because I think that's what people get caught up on, like, oh, I need to have like a perfect website, or I need to post more on social. I need to do this more. But really there's a couple things that if you like take all your energy and focus in on those things, that year over year, you're going to see great amount of growth.
First things first, if you're thinking about doing weddings specifically, one thing to note is that your first year is going to be a bit of a crazy journey in the sense of you're going to have to do all kinds of things to really figure out what weddings are like in the sense of how they, if you've never shot a wedding before or been part of a wedding before, that is definitely something that you need to figure out. So whether you can, go and assist a photographer who's very established, maybe you're not shooting that wedding, but you're at least assisting them, bringing their bags or getting them water or, holding an umbrella if it's raining, whatever, but you're at least learning that process of what a wedding day is like is so crucial. I think that's one thing that people don't understand if they're newer and they go, hey, can I second shoot? I'll second shoot for free. The thing is when a couple hires us, who've been doing this for years and years, they're looking to hire a professional second shooter, not somebody who's never shot a wedding before. And so offering even to do your services for free is actually kind of putting you at a disadvantage, because there's no way that they're going to go, okay, cool, I'll save the $500 that I would normally pay a second shooter, but I'm not going to be able to use any of their images if they end up being bad, right? And so there's a huge risk to that photographer if they just, use you and it's your first time shooting a wedding, because they even if they look at your portfolio and you've done a whole bunch of sessions outside or maybe in a studio, it's a very different pace on a wedding day. And there's really only one chance to get those shots. So I would say more likely than not, most photographers are going to say kick dirt, basically. Offering to assist is a different ball game. So even if you're offering to take behind the scenes, of photos of them or videos on their phone, if you're offering to hold their bags or, just all kinds of things that you can do to assist them, every photographer will have different things that they need. That is a really great option, I think, for you to start on essentially and learn that very much like every wedding is different, but there is kind of a flow, and it's really kind of understanding and being ready for things, right? Like knowing what's coming up next is really part of the wedding process.
Second shooting is a great way to get into the wedding industry. Like you said, knowing the flow of a wedding day is super important, from prep to ceremony to reception. Other ways that you can break into the wedding industry is offering your services at a discount. The discount can almost get 100%. So you have to be ready, but you have to do it tactically. One of the big things that we ended up doing is if we shot for free, at the very least, we wanted either this type of client or we wanted to shoot at this specific venue. We find that clients come to you once they're ready to pay for your services, and they love seeing that you have experience at specific venues. And so for us, in the early parts of our career, we made an effort to reach out to not only planners that we wanted to be with, but also the venues or the weddings that would get us the type of portfolio that we wanted in order to shoot more of that kind. And then another thing that we liked to ask our clients that we shot for free, or, it's always good that you tell them how much your service would cost at full price. And then you discount it, because if they were to ever refer you to anyone, which is also a big part of shooting weddings for free, it is really nice, because then if you give a good experience, they're most likely going to refer you, or at least mention your name to somebody getting married. But they need to know how much they're saving off your package. So if they do refer you, it's easy to be like, oh, well, his package was $2,000 for the 8 hours that we hired him for. And on top of that, the final thing that we got a lot of those clients to do was give us reviews. The important ones are Google reviews, because once anyone Googles anything, seeing your business with positive reviews is always something that clients are going to be happy to see. So again, you're shooting for free, but the referrals, they're going to give your actual price. You may also be able to focus on getting photos that you can share with the other vendors that are there, which is a big part of it. And on top of that, you get to build your portfolio with either the type of client you want to shoot or the venue that you want to shoot.
If you are going to start shooting weddings, one thing that I would say that is important is the type of gear that you're using. When I first started, and it was my first wedding that I was ever shooting, I kind of went and panicked and bought the best camera, the best lens, and the best flash that you could pretty much buy on the market that day, because in my head I thought, I'm a fraud, and if I show up with this, $1,000 camera, even though they know I'm not that experienced, they're going to think I'm a fraud. And so I had this huge anxiety and went and bought this camera. Now, looking back, do I think it was a good idea? I mean, yes, obviously I've used that camera and I got my money's worth out of it. But if I were brand new and I wasn't sure, my recommendation would be to go and rent that camera. So versus just spending, $7,000 on new equipment, it was definitely a risk, but I knew that I was going to make sure that I was going to pay for that camera by working and capturing whatever it took to kind of make that money back. And maybe that's the type of person that you are, and that makes sense for you to go and buy the best stuff. But my recommendation would be to just try renting, especially if it's like you're not quite sure if you really love weddings or anything like that yet, because it is a huge investment.
This was like 10 years ago, right? It was really important that you got a dual recording camera. And I think a lot of cameras nowadays probably do that naturally because the technology has just advanced so much.
Yeah.
So even $1,000 or $1,500 camera now can probably do what your $5,000 camera could have done 10 years ago. So people are lucky to that, but at the same time, a very good point on renting gear, because especially with lenses. So even if you invest in a body, you can just rent the lenses you need. If you're second shooting and ask the photographer, hey, what kind of lenses would you like me to bring? And if he says like 7200 or telephoto and all you have is, a 24 to 105 f4, then maybe just renting it, because it's like $100 or something for the day, or 200. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty cheap, and it's a very good way. But we still know some established photographers that if they didn't have a specific lens and they were shooting a wedding of their own, they would go and rent it.
Yeah, or rent an extra body if they wanted to have a backup camera. Renting is probably the best way to do it. I mean, if you have 15 weddings booked, you think it's obviously worthwhile for you to invest in a camera, then that's different. But I'm talking about your first wedding. You're not even sure if you really love weddings. Look at renting, right? Or borrowing if you have a friend, that can allow you to do it. But definitely that dual card slot is important. And obviously bring your backup camera, your cheaper camera as your backup in case that one stops, right? That's another thing is like on a wedding day, right? You're not going to be able to run to the store and buy a camera in the middle of the day if your camera stops working. And when I started second shooting for other people, actually, I had that happen where the photographer, both her cameras pretty much died during the ceremony. And luckily I had 2 cameras, so I could use one still for the rest of the day and then she could use mine. So there's definitely some benefits to you having more than one camera. I'll never forget the panic that was in her face, because it was during the ceremony that these cameras stopped working. Again, this is one day, right? It's different if it's a family session and all of a sudden, I don't know, you fell into a lake and you had to reschedule the session because your camera, is obviously underwater. You can reschedule that. With a wedding, you don't really get an opportunity to do that at all.
building on that, renting is make sure that you know how to use the equipment and you're not just renting it and then showing up on the wedding day and learning how to change the settings, what wheel does what. So making sure that you have used that piece of equipment either before or you rent it the day before or whatever it is. But just make sure that you're not caught off guard showing up on a wedding day and you don't even know how to insert an SD card into it. Or you open it up and it's a CF Express or something else and you're like, well, I'm not prepared for this. So a bit of research goes a long way, and practice definitely makes perfect.
Yeah, rent it for the weekend. I think you get a weekend rate. Definitely do that. And if you can rent it like another weekend before and just practice, like book some family sessions or whatever it is that, you think you can do just to help pay for it, that's another option too.
I remember this one time I was speaking with a photographer that would rent her camera all the time for weddings. And I spoke to her and I said, well, you do so many weddings, why are you renting? And she said, for the amount of money that you spend on a new camera, I could rent the best top of the line model for that year. Every year, it changes to the next model. So I always get the best photos, and a year's worth of renting it was, $1,000 or $1,500, but buying the camera was $5,000. So there's always that a little bit. It's like renting versus owning.
Yeah.
So do the cost analysis for that one. But like, it is pretty nice to like own your own camera, but again, a lot of risk. What if it breaks? The warranty goes, all that stuff. So really work with your numbers and see what makes sense for you.
Plus, it's a nice write-off too, right? You can write off that $100 rental each time, and you can write off your camera, but you can't rent it. You can't write it off all at the same time, right? It has to be over like 5 years when it's a larger asset like that. At least where we live, that's kind of how it works. So definitely consider renting, learn from me, and know that you won't look silly if you're renting, because even like pros will rent stuff, right? So that's definitely one of our biggest recommendations if we were to go back.
Like in any industry, practicing will always help you perfect something, and doing as many weddings as you can, because each one is so situational, you run into different types of problems all the time. I think half our job is like problem solving, right? Like, it could be raining, or you go to specifically go here to do photos, but the lighting isn't right. The time of day isn't good. So knowing all these different conditions, it's a live event. It's so hard to control it. It's not like we can redo and do different takes and control and bring lighting and all that stuff. It's really just about giving a good experience while putting out fires everywhere. We always talk about that, how there's always something that goes wrong on a wedding day, and it's our job to make it seem very seamless.
Like it's not a big deal. It does come with experience. And again, learning that wedding day flow, don't discount that at all. Like there's obviously a huge part of capturing the day and being really good at that part, but that comes through practice, right? That comes through going through your photos and maybe even going through them with like a friend who's in the industry, or maybe this, if you do end up second shooting for someone, asking them to go through your photos with you and be like, you know what, I would do this differently, or I would light this differently, or maybe I would have turned off all the lights in the room, or moved the garbage bags on the bed. There's so many things that you'll learn from somebody who's put in 10,000 hours of that specific thing. So it's very difficult for you to sort of sit there and compare yourself to somebody who's been doing this for 10 years when you just started and you've got 5 weddings under your belt, and you're like, well, why aren't I booking these people? Why is nobody wanting to work with me? And the reason why is that when they meet with you and they meet with somebody who's been doing it for 10 years, it's very clear for the person, the outside person looking in, to say, well, this person is really going to take care of me. They've been in all kinds of scenarios. They know all types of lighting. They've been to all the venues, or they've been to my specific venue, and they shot my friend's wedding. And like the list goes on as to why this vendor is getting booked over you. It's very hard because that comparison is like the thief of joy, in the sense of when you look at other people and you're like, well, I'm just as good as them, right? Or I'm just as talented, or I'm more talented than that person. The thing is, though, is that it doesn't usually come across until you have put in the time, right? So again, you should only be comparing yourself with people who've maybe been doing it as long as you have. And maybe that's where you should be. Our biggest thing is that we don't like to compare ourselves with people who are around this area, because to us, it's like, it doesn't really make sense, in the sense of like, why would I want to get inspired by people who are doing the exact same thing as me? And for me, what I find is like I like to draw inspiration from other people like around the globe that are doing things, because it's also just a fresher perspective and you know, perhaps something that you don't want to copy what other people are doing either, in the sense of like, if you do go to the same venue, like you don't necessarily want to shoot the exact same shot in the exact same way. Like, that's just my 2 cents of it anyways. But the idea is that you really do need to put in the time. You need to really give yourself grace when you're doing that, and try and get as much feedback, learn as much as you can from every single wedding that you're attending. I think that's my biggest feedback when it comes to that.
Yeah, a lot of people start off and they have a full-time job at the same time, right? So they're balancing this as a part-time thing up until you know, we've been through the process of having full-time jobs ourselves while balancing this business until it became too much and we had to make a decision. But up until that point where it became too much, I think you need to be able to sustain yourself. And I think that it's an advantage if you don't need to do it for the money, and you can work on the separate skills that you're going to need in order to give a good experience. And that plays a huge part, the experience of your client, because like you said, you could look at someone else's photos and be like, my photos are better than theirs. How come they're booking so many people and they're getting successful? Probably because they've shot a bunch of weddings and they do have a portfolio at different locations, but also they gave a good experience and now they're getting referred by people. So not only is shooting for free, like I said earlier, get some stuff or discounted, right? Like you can probably do some for free, but then, you know, people start knowing your name and you run a promotional rate, whatever it is, or book you at full price. But you want to just get as many reps in as you can, different venues, different lighting situations, practice, bring it back home, edit it, deliver it. But the client really will remember how it felt on the wedding day and that experience and like how you took care of them. So that is where I would focus a lot of my energy, on the actual customer journey and experience and what you bring to them on the day of, because it makes a huge impact on the day.
Exactly. And that really comes down to knowing who your ideal client is. And the only way you can figure that out is by doing the volume thing. It's very clear, like extremely clear, when you book somebody and you arrive on the day and you're just not vibing. You're not on the same page. What you thought they were like is completely the opposite. And that is only training you to know that, okay, these are not my people, right? Like I'm still going to do my best. I'm going to do everything that I can to make this work. But it's always sometimes those clients that really teach you the most, right? And we've had that so many times where we've been at a wedding and just been like, ooh, like, I don't know if these are like exactly the type of people that we want to be capturing, because like they're maybe just not this on the same page as us, and that's okay. They booked us because they like our work and they love, you know, the experience and all that kind of stuff. But there's, you know, that extra step is where we also feel really comfortable too, right? So again, at the beginning, you're probably not going to find that right away. You're most likely going to find where you're going to have like all kinds of different clients, and that's okay. But the thing is try to take each one and learn from them. Learn what you loved about that wedding, learn what you didn't like about that wedding, and see if you can try to figure that out as you go through each one or as you're booking new people. Because again, it's all a learning process, right? And sometimes too, on a wedding day, that's another thing to keep in mind. Couples are very stressed. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of investment in time, investment in, you know, their families and dealing with all that and stuff. There's so much that goes into a wedding day that sometimes you have to take that with a grain of salt too. If they're just not themselves, or what you when you met them, you know, when you first talked to them, and they're not really the same type of person on the wedding day, sometimes that's also being, you know, what's at play there. So keep that in mind too. Weddings are stressful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And let's take it back even further where, okay, I have a camera. I want to get into weddings. Like, what are some of the first steps that I need to do? And the thing that comes to my mind is, one, have a way of them finding you. Oh, yeah. So a website, or, you know, even a free website. There's a lot of ones that you can just create for free. Essentially, it's like a one pager, you know, this is what I do. And here's a bit of my work, if you have any. And then here's how to contact me, or my pricing, you know, like somewhere in there, that information needs to be there so that people can actually find you. The next up is just reaching out to venues, planners, because you can't really reach out to couples and be like, hey, I'm going to shoot your wedding for free. You have to get there through another network or like a Facebook group or whatever it is. Find a way to get your name out there in order to even shoot these for free or a discounted rate so that you can get in there.
Yeah.
But you'll see it's kind of one of those where like the more you do it, more people will like seek you out and more people will easily take you on. So the first step is always the hardest of getting in there. And photographers, creatives, we're all introverted in one way. I think because we were extroverted people before we became creatives, that we have a good balance of that. But a lot of people are shy, or they think that they're going to get judged for doing certain things. And the worst people can really tell you is no.
Exactly.
Rejection. You just have to learn to, like, that's part of it. That's part of the game.
Yeah.
Knowing how to deal with the rejection of it all.
But we also see, like, I still see very regularly Facebook posts where somebody's like, hey, I'm getting married. I'm having a small wedding, or I'm getting married at City Hall. Mm-hmm. I want a new photographer. I want somebody who's looking to build their portfolio. I still see that all the time, like all the time. It's the worst when somebody tags me because I'm like, well, I'm not building my portfolio, but if you don't find somebody, obviously great. But the idea is that there's always room for every skill level when it comes to the photography world as well.
Yeah.
When we look back at our beginning work, I honestly sometimes question how people even hired us sometimes.
It's true.
Because I thought I was amazing. I thought I was like the best thing since sliced bread. Because you do, right? You're like, wow, I took that. I'm so good.
Because at the time, that's the best you've ever done.
Exactly. When I look back though, I'm like, well, I would definitely do things a little bit different. There are some really amazing photos like that I have in the beginnings of my career that are just like, you know what? It actually looks very similar to what it would be like today. But there are some questionable things in there. So just know there is going to be growing pains when it comes through this. Obviously, you learn a lot through clients as well. That's another thing I found that through the years is just listening to your clients that you talk to. And I'll never forget some of the ones that I had in the very beginnings of my career where it was like how important it was to get certain moments captured on a day. For instance, like having a single photo, the bride really didn't have a single photo of her and her mom together. And somebody said that to me in the very beginning. And now that that's stuck with me for the last decade, knowing that I absolutely need to get a picture of the bride with her mom alone, and I know that sounds so silly that it still sticks with me today, but it's something where I heard from somebody that they were really disappointed they didn't get this. And so now I go out of my way to make sure that I get it. Right. And so make sure that you're listening to podcasts as well, like ours or other professionals who do this, because they're going to give you these little stories, these little examples where hopefully you can take that information and go, oh my gosh, I never even thought about doing it like that. I never realized how important that was. And now you can take that with you and do that on a day. And honestly, sometimes maybe some clients wouldn't care if they had a picture alone with their mom. Like maybe they're not that close or whatever. But in this case, that sticks with me. And so again, you're going to find your little things that stick with you. Do you have any examples like that stick with you?
I just have what I call life lessons, which is very similar to that, where every year we always find some, we try to refine everything so PC and so neutral and be as nice to everyone as possible. And somehow somebody will find one little nitpick thing and then bring it to your attention. And then you remember that.
Yeah.
That, yes, this one thing, I forgot a comma in an email and they were so upset about that. That's how ridiculous it can be sometimes, where it's out of your control completely and they leave you a negative review. It's part of the business. For me, just personal mistakes that I've made through shooting, I cut off their arm when I did a certain shot, or it was blurry, when I took a group photo, and that's just life, and next time that I do a group photo, I'm going to know, I better fucking nail this.
And don't move until you nail it. I think it's also different for you because I had a few years of doing a lot of things and I was able to teach you. Right? I was very just candid with you through that process and saying hey, don't cut their legs off, or don't, have their heads too close to the top of the frame. Like all the little things that I've learned throughout the years, I was able to just like right away show you. Not everybody has that, right? So again, aligning yourself with people who you can, get that advice is really important too.
Finding a mentor could be huge for you in your business, especially if it's somebody that you really look up to and they're willing to take you in.
Well, you might have to pay some money.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's another thing, is like looking maybe for a mentor that is where you want to be.
Yeah.
Right?
And professional development, I find it's such an investment in yourself and your business that you'll always get return on it, right? It's not like you're, buying a McDonald's meal where you eat it and it's gone and that's it. Your money is just in cyberspace. No, but the things you learn that from a mentor, from somebody that has done it forever, it's like those life lessons, all of the mistakes that they've made and now they've implemented in their business safeguards in order to avoid all those things. And if you can take those, like you may not have ever made those mistakes, and maybe those safeguards, you'll let one slip one time, you will make a mistake and you'll remember that forever. But there's a lot of good information that you can get from people on like different styles of how to approach clients. And it's second nature to us. And it's crazy to think that just the way that we introduce ourselves in the beginning of the day, and like it sets up the whole thing, and how we manipulate a getting ready space in order to have a nice photo area. Not a lot of people do that. Or like putting hands in pockets, because for us, that's like our style and we really like it. And it cleans up. People don't know what to do with their hands a lot of the time. So they're just like, I don't know, just like here or here, or like they'll cross it like this, like that. So all of that makes perfect sense when somebody explains it to you. So just having that like one-on-one connection with somebody and having their point of view on something, and not just seeing like the final product, right? Because I need to know what happened between like taking the photo and, delivering it. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. We've invested into coaches and mentors and all those things for years as well. Like we've definitely put lots of money behind that, and we've always walked away with something, right? Whether it's just a mindset shift, whether there's learning opportunities, whether it's just, realizing like, yeah, we can do these things, right? Like I'll never forget, like one of the first coaches that I had, I was just so hung up on like what other people thought of me. Like for the longest time,
You were hung up, or you are hung up?
No, I was like worse probably. And I can just remember being like, why do I care so much? Why do I care about what these people are saying about me online? Like it's hard. It sucks. It's not nice to have, people who are like out to get you. But at the same time, there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do to change their mind.
They're just jealous of me.
Well, that's what we have to boil it down to, right? Is that why are they talking about you anyways? Why? Right. Like either they're jealous, or you've done something that's like, they're seeing their failures in you, and that's why they're talking badly, right? And so the only way that they can kind of bring you down a peg is to talk bad about you. And so I feel like that comparison thing, like that was definitely one of the biggest struggles that I had at the beginning, is like
Imposter syndrome
and comparison, and what people were saying about me, because I was part of this Facebook group. If you go back to the very beginning, I have a whole episode on bullying, and I was bullied really badly in my local community. I mean, I haven't been since then, but it was terrible. It was definitely the worst experience, and it definitely, I would say, stopped me from progressing as fast as I probably could have, because I was so caught up on how terrible these people were.
I think being receptive to feedback is also a big part of growing in the business, not only from like your clients, or if you hire a mentor or coach and you're paying for this information, but also the feedback. We love hiring second shooters and then just going through their photo, or just giving them an idea of like, here's what we liked or didn't like about it. And that will literally determine if we're going to be rehiring you as a second shooter. And again, if you second shoot for, a company like ours that's really established, you can learn a lot just from doing that, and like make money while learning. Like who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah. Honestly, if you can get to second shoot with somebody, you need to kind of learn everything that you can about what they do and do not want and what's important to them and what's not, because it might be very different than what you're used to.
Every photographer is super different in that style.
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of looking for similar shots, but the way that we put things together, you know, like I know from working with second shooters, they're like, oh, wow, you do this so differently than me. And it's like, yeah, but that's just how I do it. So please don't do it that way.
Get with the program.
So being flexible in that regards too. But yeah, definitely putting your hat out there for anybody who's looking, you know, to do, you know, build their portfolio, right? Like there's always those posts. There's photographers who are looking for assistance maybe on a wedding day or do behind the scenes, offer something for them, right? In return, don't just say like, hey, I'll second shoot for free. That's not really an appealing offer, to be honest with you. It's just not. And I can tell you that most photographers would just be like, no, it's actually like, why don't you pay me actually to learn, you know, everything that I've learned in the last 10 years. Like, how about you pay me to second shoot for me? That's kind of the attitude that most people would have. It's sad, but true, because there is so much depending on that person. Last but not least is really just to refine your craft. Learn as much as you can. Learn that wedding day process, because without it, like you're just going to be set up for failure. You're going to miss stuff. You're not going to be able to anticipate as many moments as you think you can. And just be ready to sort of get feedback, right? Like you're going to make mistakes. We all do. We really do. You know, have I gone to a wedding and missed something? Absolutely, right? And it's just part of what we do. We're capturing live events. And so keep that in mind when you're shooting a wedding specifically.
One thing that you can't really figure out from the beginning, but kind of evolves over time, is your brand and your style and the type of photos that you want to deliver to your clients. Because in the end, it's what makes you different that will attract clients. It's your brand. Well, I know I already said it, but it's your brand. And we struggled with that for a long time because we looked up to certain photographers and we're like, we really love that stuff, right? So we're like, we're going to do what they do. And then you find that people are going to hire that person if you're just as similar and they have like obviously 5 more years of experience, like they were established photographers, that they're not going to hire you based on like the work is the same. They're going to hire that person because of their experience or because of the customer journey that they're on and the great reviews or whatever it is, right? So at the beginning, I would say experiment with a lot of different stuff, like experiment editing darker stuff, lighter stuff, doing like direct sunlight, direct flash, off-camera flash. Try everything that you can, because you never know until you do it that you're going to like it or that you like editing it. A lot of it is also work that you put out there and the feedback that you get from clients or other people. It can really, that was the big thing for me, is like the first time I posted a wedding video and I was like, oh man, I don't know if this is any good. And then people are like, I love it. And you're like, really? You love that? Okay. Like I'm going to create more of that kind or do this. So it's all about just like rinse, repeat, shoot stuff, edit stuff, practice, and throw it out there and just see if people like it, you know, and then eventually you'll just find that niche or find your market in there.
Yeah, I struggled a lot with what my style was, what my brand was, because I feel like everyone's like, you need to understand who your ideal client is and what your brand is and your messaging and all these things that are just thrown at you. And you're like, I have no idea.
There's so much. It's overwhelming.
I have no freaking idea what my brand identity and messaging should be. And I'll be honest with you, it's still changing for us. Like what we thought our brand messaging was very clear on is that we want our couples to have fun on a wedding day, but we also want them to be very much captured in a way that's like authentically them while they're having fun, but still kind of capturing those romantic moments, right? And like the sort of roller coaster that we call the wedding day, where there's going to be tears, there's going to be extreme laughter, there's going to be dancing, all the things, right? Like, and it's basically this roller coaster that our clients go on. But we found over the years that what our brand boils down to, like really what it comes down to, is what do we as people, as individuals, like capturing? And who do we like capturing? Like what kind of people do we like? In the sense of, do they have similar values to us? Do they like similar things to us, right? Do they have that same kind of energy that matches us on a wedding day?
And that's funny. It's funny that you say that, because a lot of photographers are probably like, I want giant centerpieces and I want arches and flowers and this venue and that venue. And that's the kind of weddings I want. wrong. Like, you could want all those things and get them, but your clients are not going to be the same. Like, they're going to be random, and it might be a good day and it might be a bad day.
Well, the thing is there's different levels of sort of expectations,
True,
right? In
yeah.
the sense of like, if you're shooting a $300,000 wedding, the expectations are going to be really high. Whereas if you're shooting a $30,000 wedding or like a $10,000 or like whatever, there's just different levels of sort of expectations that come with those. But when I'm talking about brand, it's really much, or it's really, when I'm talking about brand, it's really about what you bring to the table as an individual, in the sense of, okay, we really like to have fun on a wedding day, but what does that really mean? Like, what does having fun on a wedding day sort of like, how do you how do you incorporate that? How do you sell that? And for us, it's like, okay, well, we've realized like we need to show more of our couples having fun on the wedding day. So them dancing, right? Like when we say like, you're going to dance even if there's no music on sometimes, because we want to kind of capture that fun and get that energy going. And we want our couples to trust us. That's another big thing. So how do we get them to trust us? Well, they have to know who we are as people. So, like everybody knows that you love hot sauce and I love Diet Coke, and we like watching certain TV shows or whatever. And we love going out and partying and having a good time, right? Like that work hard, play hard. People know that we're very hard workers as well, right? I would say like if people were to describe us, they'd think that we work really hard, and other people see that in us, right? And so people that are also in their field, right? Whether they're a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or a teacher, and they put everything into their work, they're going to relate to us in that level, right? And so I find that the brand and that will develop once you figure out really what you like to capture as well. So know that it's changing. Even for us, it's changed, right?
Well, it's changed even from like last month to this month, like we went to the conference and learned a whole bunch, and it really did give us a new perspective on things. But I think we've always like wanted a specific vision. We just didn't know how to achieve it. And it's still like, it's ever evolving, like you're saying.
Yeah. And we change as individuals as well.
True.
I think that's another thing, right? Like who I was 5 years ago, I'm a very different person now, right? Like I was like, pregnant and like, thinking about
who I was 5 years ago. I was pregnant. Okay. Yeah. That's who I was.
No, but it's just like, I was in a different space, right? Yeah. Like we're not trying to grow our family or anything. So we know that this is, we're just different people, and we've grown. We hope that you got something out of this episode, in the sense of this is what we would do differently for sure, is just really focus in on these things to really...
What are some of the highlights here? So doing as many weddings as you can, but being tactical about getting something out of it.
Yeah, getting reviews from people, providing an excellent service for those people that you do work with, learning your craft, figuring out what style is important to you. Make sure you have a website, socials. Those are kind of like the bare minimums. And
networking with the planners and other people. If you're a photographer or other videographers, anyone that's going to be met before you, typically, really then they can refer you down the line as well.
Yeah. And also make sure that you're not buying new gear.
Renting
is definitely a plus side as well. If you have any questions about building a photography business, or you want to learn a little bit more, we are actually going to be offering mentoring sessions starting this season, and we're looking for new people. So if this is something that would be interest of you, please reach out. We have done mentoring before in the past, but we're really kind of looking to dive deep into this again this season, because we think that there's so many people out there who are looking for this and who could benefit from this. So if that's something that of interest you, be sure to reach out to us.
All right.
Bye.
Bethany turning heads with their flash. Wedding photographers capturing love in a flash. Taking shots like paparazzi, they're a dynamic duo. Posing couples like models on their love they bestow. Shooting weddings, they got the perfect frame. Look behind the lens while Bethany brings the flame. Capturing every moment, they never miss a beat. Freezing time, making memories that are oh so